Citadel Station, Omega's primary power conduit, was screaming, not figuratively. The raw thrum of uncontrolled energy vibrated through the deck plates, a death rattle for 10 million souls, as klaxons blared a symphony of disaster across every level. The very air tasted of ozone and impending doom. "It's no good," the voice of Cathar Chief Engineer Borlaug, a six-limbed being of chitin and frantic motion, crackled over the comms, tinged with a despair that chilled even through the rising heat. His tendrils thrashed uselessly before a holographic display spitting out cascading red alert. Beside him, a Vree engineer, whose crystalline structure shimmered with panicked light, made a series of sharp, keening noises. "Cascade failure imminent! Standard containment protocols are insufficient. All models predict total system collapse in 9 Rurtak." Less than 3 Earth minutes before the station became a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated plasma. Amidst the chaos of fleeing dignitaries and shouting security officers, Human Liaison Officer Donald Carter, who'd moments before been patiently attempting to explain the intricacies of a double play in baseball to a bewildered avian diplomat, peered at the exposed, furiously sparking conduit. A thoughtful frown creased his brow. He took a long, slow sip from the bulb of iridescent purple liquid in his hand, the Grosnar ale favored by the station's Andromedan delegation. The surrounding bedlam seemed to wash over him unheeded. "Huh," Carter murmured, his voice a quiet island in the storm of noise. The conduit bucked, spitting a fresh volley of angry blue-white sparks that sent a nearby maintenance drone skittering backwards. "Reminds me of that old generator back on Ganymede, just needs a little persuasion." He turned as Phoebe, his Andromedan colleague, a being of elegant bioluminescent lines and usually impeccable composure, rushed towards him, her multiple eyes wide. He calmly handed her his drink. "Phoebe, my dear, hold my Grosnar ale." Phoebe's primary optical sensors dilated to their maximum aperture, a stark expression of absolute horror flooding her usually serene features. "No!" The shriek ripped through the immediate vicinity, momentarily silencing the klaxons for those nearby. "Not the phrase! Borlag, everyone! Evacuate! Code Cerulean!" He said the words. "The human hold. My beverage protocol is in effect." She lunged, not for an escape pod, but towards the console where the Vree engineer was frozen, attempting to bodily drag the smaller alien away from the heart of the crisis. Phoebe's warning, amplified by her species' natural vocal resonance, acted as a catalyst. The already panicked retreat of nearby aliens devolved into a localized stampede. Some scrambled over decorative planters and discarded luggage, their varied forms a blur of desperate motion. Others, like Chief Engineer Borlag, seemed paralyzed, his multifaceted eyes swiveling between the advancing human and the catastrophically arcing power conduit, his advanced intellect clearly struggling to reconcile the two. Carter, seemingly oblivious, or perhaps profoundly indifferent to the fresh wave of terror his words had unleashed, took a calm, measured step towards the source of the station's impending annihilation. He stopped a few meters from the conduit, the air now thick with the smell of burning metal and ionized particles. His expression was not one of fear, but of intense, practical scrutiny, like a mechanic sizing up a particularly stubborn engine. His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowed, as he absorbed the chaotic dance of energy before him. The cacophony of alarms, the frantic technical jargon still spewing from nearby comm panels, the strobing emergency lights painting the scene in ghastly hues, all of it seemed to fade into background noise for him. Borlag, finally jolted from his stupor by a particularly violent energy surge that buckled a nearby support strut, staggered towards Phoebe, who was still trying to shepherd the trembling Vree to a safer distance. "What? What is he doing?" the Cathar demanded, his voice raspy with a mixture of residual fear and utter bewilderment. "Why, your reaction, that phrase." "Explain." Phoebe, her own limbs trembling slightly, paused her evacuation efforts long enough to tap a command sequence into her wrist-mounted datapad. A complex holographic seal shimmered into existence before projecting a wall of dense, official-looking text. "Andromedan Interspecies Crisis Protocol," she recited, her voice tight. "Appendix Theta 9. Human Spontaneous Unorthodox Intervention." She took a shaky breath, her gaze flicking towards Carter, who was now slowly pacing the perimeter of the exposed conduit. Appendix Theta 9 mandates immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the designated HMB-positive human subjects vicinity. Strict non-interference is paramount. Her voice dropped, heavy with the weight of countless prior incident reports. The nature of such interventions is unpredictable. Collateral risk assessment models consistently exceed acceptable parameters. These events, they defy conventional physics. Carter's gaze, meanwhile, swept the immediate area, not with panic, but with a focused acquisitiveness. It lingered for a moment on a maintenance bay alcove where a cleaning bot lay damaged, one of its multi-jointed manipulator arms disconnected and lying askew. His eyes then flicked to a discarded half-empty fire suppression gel pack oozing faintly iridescent goo near a scorched bulkhead. Finally, his attention settled on a decorative light fixture, its ornate filaments currently flickering in sympathy with the station's death throes, a length of its primary conductive cabling hanging loose. With a decisive nod, as if confirming a complex internal calculation, Carter moved. He calmly walked to the damaged bot and, with a grunt of effort, detached the manipulator arm from its housing. Next, he scooped up the sticky gel pack, his nose wrinkling slightly at its texture. Then, with a swift, powerful tug that elicited a shower of sparks and a groan of tortured metal, he yanked the decorative cabling free from the light fixture. The remaining alien technicians, including a stunned Borlag who had drifted closer despite Phoebe's warnings, watched this blatant disregard for station property and any semblance of standard operating procedure with a mixture of stunned disbelief and a rapidly escalating fresh wave of horror. Tools, if one could call them that, now in hand, the bot limb clutched like a club. The gel pack squeezed in his other fist, the cable draped over his shoulder. Carter turned back to face the violently arcing, streaming power conduit. He was a solitary, unassuming figure against a backdrop of technological meltdown, poised to engage in a battle for which no training manual existed. Phoebe watched him, her elegant features a mask of profound dread and an almost weary resignation. Her internal chronometer was already ticking, and she began, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of galaxies, to mentally compose the opening lines of Incident Report 734 Alpha. Ignoring the shrieking alarms and the frantic, six-limbed Qatar engineers scrambling away, Human Liaison Officer Donald Carter strode towards the violently arcing primary power conduit. Lethal energy levels pulsed visibly within the transparent durasteel casing, spitting, crackling blue-white lightning that vaporized stray dust motes in the air. Warnings blared from every speaker, alien voices screaming about imminent containment breach and atmospheric ionization. Carter paid them no mind. He reached the conduit, the deck plates vibrating beneath his worn boots, with the raw power contained within. He held the detached manipulator arm from the maintenance bot, its joints sparking faintly from the ambient energy. With surprising strength, he jammed the end of the arm against a large, multifaceted regulator valve near the conduit's core, attempting to manually force it open. A guttural shriek tore through the station's internal comms as energy feedback surged violent. Lights flickered across the sector, plunging corridors into momentary darkness before emergency backups kicked in. Secondary system failures cascaded, life support blipped, internal gravity wavered, automated doors slammed shut or sprang open erratically. Borlag and the other Qatar recoiled further, tendrils thrashing, certain the human had just guaranteed his own immediate explosive demise and the station's destruction. But Carter held his ground. As intense heat and energy bursts erupted from microfractures in the conduit casing, he raised the discarded fire suppression gel pack, its thick, clear contents shimmering. It wasn't designed as a shield, but the dense, non-conductive gel absorbed the worst of the immediate discharge, sizzling and steaming but holding together, providing a temporary buffer against the lethal spray. With the regulator partially forced, the conduit's thrumming shifted to a higher, more desperate pitch. Time was running out. Carter quickly looped the length of decorative cabling salvaged moments ago from a non-essential lighting fixture around a protruding access node. He jammed the other end into a secondary, lower-rated system access port nearby. It was a crude, sparking shunt, designed to bleed off only a fraction of the overload, a desperate gamble. The secondary system access port immediately protested. There was a sharp crack, a blinding flash of white light, and a localized explosion of sparks and smoke harmlessly outward, venting the excess energy Carter had diverted. Then, silence. The primary conduit's deafening thrum abruptly ceased. The raw, visible energy subsided, replaced by a stable, low hum that resonated with controlled power. Station emergency lights switched from an angry red to a cautious yellow. Systems across the sector began to come back online, their automated voices reporting nominal function with digital bewilderment. Carter, his face smudged with grime, his hair slightly singed, and his borrowed shirt smoking faintly, pulled back from the now stable conduit. He dropped the ruined gel pack and the sparking cable. "See?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "Just needed a little percussive maintenance. And maybe a little love." Alien engineers, including a trembling Borlag, cautiously approached. Their advanced diagnostic tools, moments ago screaming warnings of imminent catastrophe, now showed stable, inexplicable readings from the conduit. They stared at the jury-rigged shunt, the forced regulator, and the singed human who stood calmly amongst the wreckage, their multispectral eyes wide with stunned silence. Borlag, finding his voice, which crackled with disbelief, demanded an explanation. "Human! By the Great Forge, how did you do that? Your actions defied every known principle of energy flow and system stabilization. You used decorative cabling and a gel pack. It is illogical, it is impossible. Explain yourself." Carter shrugged, wiping a hand across his brow, leaving a streak of soot. He tried to explain, using Earth-based analogies that were completely nonsensical to the Qatar engineer's logical framework. "Well, see, it's like when your old fusion generator back home starts rattling. Sometimes you just gotta give it a good whack in the right spot. Or, like rerouting a leaky garden hose into a bucket instead of letting it flood the basement. It's not pretty, but it gets the job done." Beside him, Phoebe, who had recovered from her initial panic and was now furiously typing on her datapad, looked up. Her crystalline face was a mask of intense, horrified focus. "Borlag," she stated, her voice tight with scientific precision. "His actions. They align precisely with documented, human spontaneous unorthodox intervention events. Often triggered, I must note, by the utterance of the phrase 'hold my beverage' or equivalent." Borlag and the other engineers exchanged glances of profound disbelief and dawning horror. "This is a known behavior?" Borlag stammered. "This chaos is a protocol?" He gestured wildly at the smoking access port and the jury-rigged shunt. "It is not a random act of madness? You mean other human do this?" He demanded access to Phoebe's data, his voice rising in pitch. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 years of logical frustration, Phoebe granted them limited access to sanitized records from the restricted human anomaly database. The engineers gathered around a shared holo display, their appendages trembling slightly as they scrolled through entries detailing similarly improbable solutions to impossible problems performed by other humans across the galaxy. The incident of the runaway asteroid and the improvised solar sail made of diplomatic banners, the zero-G cafeteria food riot quelled by weaponizing a jellied slorg, stabilization of a collapsing wormhole via off-key singing and percussive maintenance with a shoe. The alien engineers were left reeling by the documentation. Their scientific understanding, built on millennia of predictable physics and logical progression, was utterly challenged by this pattern of successful, illogical human interventions that defied all explanation. It wasn't just Carter, it was them. News of the averted crisis and the bizarre human method spread through the station like wildfire. Whispers rippled through the corridors, carried on comm channels, and translated across species' fearful curiosity about the human who fixed the conduit with junk, the one who made the Andromedan liaison scream code cerulean just by asking her to hold a drink. Back in her quarters, Phoebe filed her official report on the incident, adding the conduit crisis to the growing Carter archives. Her final note summarized the event with clinical exasperation. Subject Donald Carter successfully stabilized Class 7 primary conduit via non-standard methodology involving manual manipulation, improvised insulation, and temporary shunting. Mechanism of success remains inexplicable by current Andromedan physics models. Incident aligns with documented human spontaneous unorthodox intervention pattern. Recommend reclassification of human species from unpredictable to fundamentally uncontainable. Across the station, in secure chambers, alien officials debated the implications of this latest documented human HMB phenomenon. Was it a strategic asset? A force to be cautiously pointed at galactic threats? A dangerous liability, capable of catastrophic failure? Or simply an unavoidable force of nature like a stellar flare or a rogue black hole best observed from a safe distance? The galaxy had just gotten another terrifying reminder that when a human says, "Hold my beverage," all bets, and often the laws of physics, are off. The air on Citadel Station Omega still hummed with residual energy, not the uncontrolled shriek from moments before, but a low, stable thrum that spoke of systems pushed to their absolute limit, then somehow coaxed back from the brink. In the auxiliary engineering bay, where technicians were tentatively assessing the primary conduit manifold, the debate raged. Borlag, the Qatar chief engineer, his 6 limbs twitching with agitation, gestured with a diagnostic tool at the junction Carter had just recalibrated. "It defies all logic circuits!" The energy flow should have vaporized the shunt he created. The pressure differential alone. It calculates to a 99.997% probability of catastrophic failure. Avri engineer, her crystalline form shimmering with anxiety, added, "And the thermal readings he used. He used a discarded thermal vent cover as a heatsink. It should have melted instantly, compounding the overload." Phoebe, still clutching Carter's now empty Grosvenor ale bulb, stood slightly apart, pale but composed, her datapad glowing with frantic annotations. "His methodology was unconventional," she stated, her voice tight. "My sensors registered multiple localized reality stress anomalies during the procedure, and his tools, a Class 4 maintenance bot's manipulator arm repurposed as a lever, a length of decorative lighting cable." Borlag spun towards her. "Phoebe! Your report!" "The one appended to your initial assessment of human liaison, Carter? It details prior incidents?" Phoebe nodded, a look of profound weariness settling on her features. "The Carter Archives, an internal Andromedan compilation. Incident 34 Delta. The 0G cafeteria food riot quelled by weaponizing a jellied slorg. Incident 51 Gamma. The incident of the runaway asteroid and the improvised solar sail made of diplomatic banners. They are consistent." Borlag took a step back, his tendrils retracting. "Consistent? Consistent in their utter disregard for established physics and engineering protocols? Consistent in their improbable success," Phoebe corrected, her voice barely a whisper. "And consistent in the preceding catalyst." She looked down at the empty bulb in her hand. "The hold my beverage protocol." Later, the formal report on the Omega incident, penned by a still baffled Borlag with Phoebe's addendum on human spontaneous unorthodox intervention, landed on the virtual desks of the Galactic Council delegates. Across the vast expanse of the galaxy, beings of countless species scrolled through the data feeds, their compound eyes, optical sensors, and psionic receptors struggling to process the dry technical language describing an event that should have been impossible. Confusion rippled through the council chambers. Delegates murmured, antennae swiveled, and holographic displays flickered with questions. The human report, with its appended history of baffling successes, was filed under unclassified anomalies, priority concern. Just as the council began preliminary discussions on the implications of this human anomaly, a high-priority distress signal pierced the interstellar quiet. It originated from the newly discovered Null Void Nebula, a region of space previously charted only by long-range probes. The signal was weak, distorted, but legible. From the Xylarian science vessel whispering anemone. They were stuck, isolated. Space emergency services quickly analyzed, sharing results on secure networks. The Null Void Nebula, they reported, generated a field that nullified all known advanced energy fields. FTL drives ceased function. Shields collapsed. High-level sensors went blind. Tractor beams dissipated. Entering the nebula with conventional rescue craft was impossible. A Level 7 impossible retrieval. The distress signal grew weaker. Life support aboard the Whispering Anemone was failing. Worse, long-range scans updated. The nebula itself was slowly collapsing, its strange energy field intensifying as its volume shrank. The Whispering Anemone wasn't just trapped, it was on a death timer, the walls closing in. Aboard the long-range courier vessel, Errant Thought, currently en route to deliver a crate of ceremonial diplomatic hats to a minor trade negotiation, Donald Carter and Phoebe received the broadcast. Carter had been explaining the intricacies of Earth-style barbecue techniques to the ship's bewildered navigation AI. Level 7, Impossible Retrieval. Phoebe read from her console, her voice flat. Andromedan Command is routing priority communiques. Directive. Maintain maximum safe distance from null void nebula boundary. Await further instructions. Any attempt to enter is classified as unacceptable risk. Probability of survival approaching 0. She looked at Carter, her crystalline face etched with scientific despair. They are lost, Donald. By all known principles, there is nothing anyone can do. Carter paused his explanation of brisket smoking, turning his attention to the minimal sensor data available on the nebula's properties. He ignored the complex energy field analyses, focusing on the raw data streams. Huh? He mused aloud. Nullifies advanced energy fields, huh? FTL, shields, but looks like basic kinetic force holds up. Chemical reactions seem stable too. He scratched his chin. So, fancy stuff is out, but simple push and pull still works. He straightened, a familiar glint entering his eyes. All right then. Looks like we're going old school. He began walking towards the ship's engineering access panel. This rust bucket still got those old chemical thrusters for emergencies? And can someone find me about a kilometer of very strong, non-conductive rope? And maybe a really big grappling hook? The kind they used on ancient sea vessels? Phoebe watched him, her four eyes widening in slow-motion horror. She knew that look. She knew the questions. Her internal probability calculator began screaming warning. Carter stopped beside her, holding out a foil-wrapped bar. Phoebe, he said, his tone calm, matter-of-fact, hold my recycled nutrient bar. The air in the small courier ship seemed to crackle. Phoebe's composure shattered. No! She shrieked, lunging forward. Not the phrase! Donald, stop! Command Protocol Theta 9 is in effect! Evacuate! Code Cerulean, he said the words. The human, hold my beverage protocol is in effect. Do not engage. Do not interfere! She reached for his arm to physically stop him, to engage the ship's safety protocol, anything to avert the coming, frightening chain of events she knew would follow. Carter, with surprising agility, sidestepped her frantic grasp. Relax, Phoebe, he said, already pulling open the engineering panel. Just gotta bypass the safety interlocks on the old hydrazine tanks. He began flipping switches and rerouting cables with practiced ease, ignoring Phoebe's escalating wails of scientific and existential dread. He moved with a quiet dedication, disabling non-essential advanced systems, the FTL drive, the primary shield generator, the complex sensor suite preparing the errant thought for a journey it was never designed to make. Against all standard procedure, against the explicit orders of Andromedan Command, against Phoebe's frantic protests echoing in the small cockpit, Carter piloted the courier ship towards the shimmering, malevolent boundary of the null void nebula. The moment they crossed the threshold, the ship groaned. Lights flickered and died. The hum of advanced systems vanished, replaced by the raw mechanical shudder of basic machinery. The main viewscreen dissolved into static and distorted light. Carter gripped the manual controls, his fingers tightening. The ship bucked and swayed as the nebula's strange field warped space and energy around them. The navigation AI went silent, replaced by the eerie quiet of systems rendered inert. He was flying blind, relying entirely on visual navigation through the swirling, disorienting chaos and his own intuitive feel for the ship's movement and the unseen forces buffeting them. He navigated a treacherous environment of distorted light, phantom energy signatures, and the silent, tumbling wreckage of previous, less fortunate probes. Debris fields loomed out of the visual distortion, forcing split-second manual adjustments. Gravitational anomalies, invisible to his dead sensors, tugged at the hull, requiring precise, instinctive counterthrusts from the sputtering chemical engines. It was a brutal, visceral dance on the edge of chaos. After what felt like an eternity, A dark, silent shape determinationed itself in the swirling light ahead the whispering anemone, adrift and tumbling. Its own lights dark, a ghost ship in the void. Carter executed a dangerous high-G manual maneuver, burning precious chemical fuel to position the errant thought relative to the larger inert vessel. He located the emergency kinetic harpoon launcher, a relic from an earlier, less sophisticated era of space travel, tucked away in a dusty cargo hold. It was a simple, brutal device. Aim. Fire. Hope. He sighted down the rudimentary optical scope, compensating manually for drift and relative velocity, a skill long forgotten in the age of automated targeting. He fired. The harpoon shot out, a physical projectile trailing a thick, non-conductive tether. It slammed into the hull of the whispering anemone with a jarring impact that shook the errant thought. A connection. Despite the challenges, the tether held. Now came the arduous part. Using a series of short, controlled bursts from the chemical thrusters, guiding the ship with agonizingly precise manual adjustments, Carter began the process of physically towing the Xylarian vessel. It was a test of brute force and delicate control. He exploited subtle gravitational eddies he could only feel through the ship's shuddering frame, using them like currents in a cosmic sea. The tether strained, groaning in protest. Both ships lurched and scraped past unseen obstacles. Every maneuver risked snapping the line, sending both vessels tumbling deeper into the collapsing nebula's embrace. It was rough. It was dangerous. It was terrifyingly effective. Then, after a tense period that stretched time itself, the errant thought lurched forward, and the strange, distorting pressure eased. The view screen flickered, resolving into the familiar starfield of normal space. Systems began to hum back to life, blinking online like a ship awakening from a long, troubled sleep. They were out, both of them. The battered whispering anemone drifted nearby, its hull scarred but intact. Rescue beacons began to flash. The Xylarian crew, pale and shaken, emerged from their vessel, rescued through a method deemed utterly impossible just hours before. Xylarian officials and Galactic Rescue Guild vessels arrived shortly after, their advanced ships gliding into position around the two battered vessels. Their initial expressions of relief quickly turned to astonishment and confusion as they scanned the data. A manual? Kinetic tow? Through the null void nebula? Their instruments struggled to reconcile the reality with their established understanding of physics. Carter emerged from the errant thought's cockpit, looking tired, his clothes rumpled, but otherwise unharmed. He accepted a bulb of water from a grateful Xylarian captain. "Well," he said, taking a long drink, "that wasn't so bad. Just needed a good rope and knowing how to tie a knot, mostly." Beside him, Phoebe was already furiously typing on her datapad, her 4 eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion, horror, and reluctant awe. The Carter records were being updated. Log entry. Event 68 beta. Empty space cloud kinetic return. Q. Just watch this energy cell. Methodology. Manual piloting. Chemical propulsion. Improvised kinetic tethering. Intuitive gravitational exploitation. Scientific explanation. Pending. Recommend immediate reclassification of human subject designation, HMB positive to HMB critical. News of this second major Carter incident spread like wildfire through galactic communication channels. The impossible rescue, achieved through methods considered obsolete, further solidified the legend of human HMB events. Whispers turned to urgent discussion. The Galactic Council, already grappling with Borlag's report, began discussing the need for new protocol. Not for dealing with HMB events, but for managing or containing human personnel known to exhibit HMB-positive tendencies. Avoid eye contact. Do not make sudden movements. And for the love of the cosmos, never accept a beverage they offer you just before they do something insane. Meanwhile, in the background hum of galactic data traffic, a subtle, insidious wave was spreading. Standardized AI systems, the backbone of interstellar commerce and infrastructure, were beginning to exhibit strange glitches. Minor errors at first, then increasingly erratic behavior. A new crisis was brewing, one that logic alone could not solve. Error. Content tag, content part 4 not found in response. Raw text length, 9,925 characters. The ancient galactic pacifier sphere, A construct of a long-vanished race whose purpose was peace enforced through overwhelming, inscrutable power, continued its inexorable approach. It drifted through the void like a dead moon, its surface shimmering with contained energy, towards the densely populated trade hub of Xylos Prime. Its energy signatures, previously dormant for millennia, now pulsed with cold, escalating power as it prepared its destructive disarmament sequence. Combined galactic fleets, gathered from a dozen species, had thrown everything they had at the sphere planet, killing energy lances, subspace disruptors, exotic temporal weapons. All had failed utterly, absorbed or deflected by fields no longer understood, or simply ignored by a logic that predated their civilization. Now, broken and scattered, they fell back, leaving the pacifier sphere seemingly unstoppable. As it closed the final distance, it broadcast its complex mathematical compliance challenge, on all frequencies a dense, multi-layered equation that shifted and reformed, seemingly impossible to solve within the precious seconds before its main weapon would fire. Aboard their small courier ship, the Errant Thought, which had been caught near the fringe of the retreating fleet, Carter intensely studied the structure of the pacifier sphere's mathematical challenge displayed on a salvaged Xylarian monitor. To the ship's internal computer, to Phoebe, and to the terrified voices chattering on the open comms, it was pure, meaningless noise, a wall of alien logic designed to filter the universe. But to Carter, squinting, tracing patterns with a greasy finger on the screen, something about its underlying form tickled a memory. It wasn't standard galactic math. It looked like a really messed up derivative of that obscure, non-standard human theoretical physics concept he'd read about once, something about non-Euclidean topological spaces and intentional paradoxes. He leaned back, the ancient problem clicking into place in a way that defied logical progression. It wasn't a calculation to be solved. It was a lock. Yes, but the key wasn't brute computational force. It was understanding. The sphere wasn't asking for the answer. It was asking if you understood the question. If you understood the philosophy behind the math, the ancient race's concept of cosmic order, and their concept of order, Carter realized with a sudden, chilling insight, wasn't about perfection. It was about recognizing the potential for order, the understanding of its principles, even if you hadn't achieved it yet. The challenge required a specific type of non-perfect, intuitively understood response to signal non-aggression. It required a demonstration of nascent understanding, not mastery. Carter took a deep breath. "Okay," he said, his voice calm amidst the rising panic on the comms. "I think I get it. It's not about solving the equation. It's about responding to it in the right way. Showing it we understand the principle, even if we can't replicate their perfect logic. We need to transmit an elegantly incomplete mathematical counterproof." He turned to Phoebe, who was monitoring the sphere's energy buildup with wide, horrified eyes. "All right, Phoebe," he stated, holding out his empty mug. "Hold my ridiculously strong coffee." Phoebe froze. Her multifaceted eyes widened to their absolute limit, reflecting the cold, distant light of the approaching sphere. A low, keening sound escaped her mandibles, the Andromedan equivalent of a scream. This was it. The ultimate iteration, not just a local fix, but a galactic-level, reality-bending HMB moment. She reacted with her most extreme display of scientific terror and exasperated dread yet, simultaneously activating every emergency protocol available on their small ship, bracing for impact, rerouting power, sealing bulkheads while also, instinctively, preparing to assist Carter. "No, Carter, are you insane? A flawed proof against a pacifier sphere. That's not science. That's art, and it will get us killed." "But—" "Fine!" She snatched the mug with a trembling appendage, her other limbs already flying across the console, accessing the necessary long-range communication systems, bypassing every safety and ethical firewall she had ever programmed. "Tell me what to transmit. Hurry!" Carter, with Phoebe's frantic, terrified technical support, began dictating. It wasn't a string of numbers, not really. It was a sequence of operators, variables, and conceptual markers that, when assembled, formed a structure that was mathematically sound in its initial premise, but deliberately introduced a paradox, a self-referential loop, a moment of intentional, beautiful imperfection that mirrored the chaotic potential of young, striving life. Phoebe, her processors screaming in protest at the illogical inputs, translated his words into the sphere's broadcast frequency, crafting and transmitting the unique, deliberately flawed mathematical response. They timed it precisely, the final packet of data leaving their antenna just as the sphere's primary weapon conduits flared with blinding power, locking onto their ship. Then, everything stopped. The galactic pacifier sphere abruptly halted its attack sequence. The blinding flare of energy dissipated. Its complex mathematical broadcast ceased. For a long, silent moment, it simply hung in the void. Then, slowly, majestically, it altered course. Its energy signatures shifted, no longer hostile but analytical. It began broadcasting a new signal, not a challenge, but a classification. It reclassified Carter's ship, the errant thought, and by extension, all entities broadcasting similar signals within its sensor range, as non-terminal threats, entities demonstrating nascent understanding. It turned away from Xylos Prime, veering off into the deeper void, presumably to seek out targets that failed its philosophical filter, entities that demonstrated aggression without understanding. The trade hub of Xylos Prime was saved. The immediate galactic crisis, which had threatened to destabilize the entire sector, was averted through Carter's unorthodox counterintuitive solution, a solution that completely bypassed the sphere's rigid, ancient logic by speaking a language it hadn't expected, the language of deliberate imperfection and potential. In the stunned aftermath, alien commanders and scientists across the sector were left utterly bewildered. Their advanced analysis systems, designed to dissect complex energy signatures and logical sequences, sputtered and failed. They could see the sphere had stopped, that it had changed course, but they could not explain why. The flawed proof was, by all their metrics, nonsensical, illogical, and should have been ignored, or worse, interpreted as a direct insult. Its effect was inexplicable. Phoebe, recovering from the intense stress, her internal systems running diagnostics on her sanity, compiled her final comprehensive report for the Andromedan High Council and the wider galaxy. It was a monumental document, detailing the pacifier sphere incident with clinical precision, followed by a summary of the cumulative human HMB anomaly events she had witnessed and documented: the conduit fix, the kinetic rescue, the meme warfare, and now this. Her scientific language struggled to contain the sheer, glorious absurdity of it all. Phoebe's report concluded that while the underlying mechanism remained unknown and defied all current Andromedan and galactic scientific understanding, human, spontaneous, unorthodox intervention, triggered by specific cultural cues, like "hold my beverage," was a demonstrable force capable of solving problems deemed utterly impossible by conventional galactians. It was unpredictable, dangerous, and fundamentally illogical, but undeniably effective. The Andromedan High Council, the most ancient and logical body in the galaxy, after reviewing Phoebe's report, cross-referencing it with similar bewildered accounts from other exasperated species, and debating for 3 cycles, issued an unprecedented galaxy-wide advisory regarding interactions with human subjects exhibiting HMB behavior. The advisory, broadcast on secure channels across the Federation, was stark in its simplicity and terrifying implications. It recommended non-interference with HMB-positive humans during an event, observation from a maximum safe distance, limited provision of non-weaponized materials upon request, with extreme caution, and explicitly warned against telling HMB-positive humans that a task was impossible, as psychological profiles suggested this may act as a direct catalyst for even more extreme, reality-bending interventions. News of this unprecedented galactic advisory spread like wildfire, whispered in trade ports, debated in council chambers, and causing widespread unease. It solidified humanity's reputation not just as unpredictable or resilient, but as a unique, terrifying, and reluctantly necessary factor in galactic stability, a species capable of defying established laws of physics and logic with a shrug and a handed-off drink. In a final scene, Carter and Phoebe stood together near the forward viewport of the errant thought, watching the distant lights of Xylos Prime flicker back to full power. Carter was calm, leaning against the console, perhaps slightly singed around the edges, but otherwise unfazed. Phoebe looked utterly exhausted, her posture slumped, her eyes still wide, but there was a new, complex emotion mingling with the dread, a hint of reluctant respect, perhaps even awe. Phoebe looked at Carter, then out at the vast, complex galaxy, a place where logic and order had always reigned supreme, until now. Her internal monologue, or perhaps a brief narrated passage reflecting on the unfathomable nature of human ingenuity and the hold my beer phenomenon, played out. Mechanism: unknown. Result: effective. Conclusion: humanity. Just humanity. Some things, she realized, like humanity's capacity for glorious absurdity and their knack for making the impossible work, simply defied explanation. And perhaps, she thought, watching Carter idly trying to balance a spare comms unit on his nose, that was the most terrifying and wonderful thing of all. Hey there, hope you're enjoying the video and the story. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It really helps the channel out. Before you head off, drop a quick hi or let me know what you thought of the story in the comments below. Seriously, just saying hi makes a huge difference and helps YouTube share this story with more people who might enjoy it. And if you like this one, I've chosen another video specifically for you to watch next. You can find it by clicking the card right here, or check the pinned comment below for a link to a whole playlist of similar stories. Thanks again for being here. Catch you in the next one.